Good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. So as mentioned, I'm French, living in Brazil, actually working for an American company that got acquired by an Australian company. So as you can guess, I'm a bit international myself. Also I'm not a designer, and you will see it by the very poor quality of my presentation, but I'm very happy to be here today, and I hope that I can share some of our knowledge about launching a global product. So Trello has been around for 5 years. Yeah, we launched the product in 2011, the company in 2014, and we got acquired this year. We have this concept of sticky notes on a board, and we try to put it into a digital format. And today I'm going to talk about the global presence we have and how we turn this product into a global product. So I will start with the fact that most companies today that have .com at the end of their name are actually born to be global, but that only being available on the internet doesn't necessarily turn you into a global product. So I'm going to start with a very simple thing, that is that a McDonald's menu all over the world. And as you can see, in Korea we have shrimps, in Malaysia we have rice, in Japan we have something that looks like a burger, in Brazil we have free meats, in French we have potatoes, which is very different from French fries. And this is just to illustrate that in the physical world with physical goods, we are used to the fact that people behave differently based on where they come from, based on their culture. And this difference of how we eat is actually a very good example of the fact that we behave differently. And our behavior goes from speaking different languages, interacting differently with people, but also having different consuming behavior. So the arguments that will make us want to buy a product or want to interact with a product will be different based on where we come from. And what's interesting is that even if we have more than 3.7 billion people using internet today, most websites are only available in an average of 8 languages, which is very few languages compared to the number of languages we have worldwide. And if we take a closer look at those languages and which websites are available in a lot of languages, most of them are actually websites from companies that have physical presence, such as McDonald's or L'Oreal or you can name any big companies, and their website is available in all those languages. But when you look at the tech world, it's much harder, especially like the SaaS world, it's much harder to find a lot of languages. And which is very strange because, as mentioned before, users' behavior will change depending on where they come from, and the language is a big role in that. So that's kind of an introduction of like what we had in mind at Trello about what it is to be a global product. But before getting into how we have localized our products and what we have done to make the experience as local as possible for our users, I will just take a step back and talk a little bit of Trello and the product itself. So this is a screenshot of Trello at the very beginning. The idea of Trello is having a lot of information in one place, being an horizontal tool, and trying to help people gain perspective on their projects. And we've always tried to be simple and delightful. And so this is Taco, our mascot. You may have seen him from time to time in our marketing content assets. But Taco, we try, because we want people to be more productive at work or more productive in their life, and we want them to gain perspective, we try to make the product as simple as possible, and we try to make it, to not force methodology on people. So if you create a new board, you will see a blue screen with nothing inside it. And that's on purpose. We don't want to guide people into what they should be doing in Trello. We believe that people can do anything they want with Trello. Much like an Excel spreadsheet that you can use to do type the name of all your friends or that you can use to do very complex macro. We want Trello to be that very powerful tool that's always simple. And so every time we've built Trello, we always ask ourselves, is this feature making Trello simpler or is it making it more complicated? And we try to always go in the simpler road. If you look at what Trello looks today, that's one of our boards. This is like the concept is pretty much the same. Obviously, the design has evolved. And we have, in part of this delightfulness that we try to always keep is, for instance, that now you can change the background. And we did a partnership with Unsplash, and you can choose any picture from Unsplash. But we also try to be, because it's a very visual tool, we also try to be very, have very visual features. So you can see the labels that are much more colorful. Now you can even, if you hover your mouse over the labels, you can even see the name of the labels. We try to always, we understand that people have requests for more specific and detailed features, and we try to add them to the product, but always by keeping it the most simple possible. And so back to global product. So Trello was already a few years old, and we had people using Trello from all over the world. And we were hearing a lot from our users, I love Trello, but I cannot use it with my coworkers because they don't speak English. And we were like, but why do they need to speak English? Like, most of the content is generated by the user. They don't really need to speak English. But people had this mental barrier that prevented them from using an English product. So so based on that, just a first thing before that. Just this example of like people not being able to use Trello because it wasn't in their language was really interesting to us, because it didn't feel that Trello was so complicated to understand, even if you didn't really understand English. But users need to feel in their comfort zone when they use your product. And so one thing when you start launching a company or a product that you think should be global, is first to have a name that's like easy to understand. And so this is the example of BlaBlaCar, who used to be called covoiturage.fr. And as very few people know outside of France, covoiturage means car sharing. And so when covoiturage.fr became bigger and fundraised money, they actually changed their name to BlaBlaCar. And I think that's a very good story of like, when you start building your product, you should think about what's your end goal and where you want your audience to be coming from, and will they understand what your name is. When you think about Trello, Trello is pronounceable in several languages. It sounds differently, so it's Trello, 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 but it's still something that people can pronounce and can use. The only one is in Greek. It means crazy, but you know, so far nobody has complained about it. Then back to translation. So this is a very simple example of the barrier that our user had with the fact that Trello was in English. If you look at the left side, it's written archive, and everybody probably knows what archive means in English. But in Portuguese, the word arquivo means document. And so people were clicking on archive thinking that they were attaching a document, whereas they were actually erasing a card. So this is a very simple experience, but it was very bad for our Brazilian users. And so based on that, we decided to actually try to understand where our users were coming from and translate the product into their languages. But we were only a startup, we had few money, very few resources, and so we had to come up with bigger idea. And so what we did is that we created a crowdsourcing project using Trello boards, as we always do. And we onboarded 500 users on Trello boards and have them as a community translate our platform. And thanks to the fact that they were using Trello, they were actually able to talk together, and it was pretty funny because I had basically boards for each language and translator talking together on the boards to comment what they were doing on the translation platform. And the funny part is that we could see the behavior, like the cultural behavior of each country. So, as you may have guessed, the Italian people were talking so much that I could almost see their hands moving. the Dutch people were almost not talking and always talking only in English and always talking to me for asking me a very direct question. And I'm not saying that to make fun of different culture, I'm just saying that using the same tool, people had a very, very different behavior. So that was very interesting for us to understand that. The other interesting part was that because we crowdsourced the translation was actually very good. So it's not always consistent, and we are aware of that because we had, dozens of people working on it that are not professional. But our users knew our product and loved it. And they understood the delightful part of our product, and they understood the jokes, and they understood the puns that we have all across the product. And all those parts that are the hardest ones to translate were actually better translated than when we did some of the languages with professional translators. So our learnings from that were that in 4 months, we were able to launch 17 new languages. Now we are available in 21 languages. And we were creating a very local experience by not only translating, but having user translating our product and making sure that the spirit of the product was represented locally. So the language is the first step, but it's not all. Speaking the language of someone is not necessarily understanding their culture. And I'm going to give some example of how each country is unique and interact differently. The first one is in the US, money is king, or queen, I don't know how you said it in English, but in French it will be king. And it's funny because the sentences and the points that you will use to sell a product in the US will be very different than it would be in another country. So this is the example of a website that sells thermostat, so something that helps you change the temperature at home. And the main argument they are making is that you can save up until $131,100 on heating your home per year. And this is very interesting because in Latino countries such as France or Brazil, we cannot say out loud that you are saving money. Money is a very bad word. We never talk about money. So in this case, in France or in Brazil, we will probably be saying, you are helping the world be a better place. You are saving that much energy. And we would be having an argument that's not using the word money, but that's using something else that that this product is helping you doing. And so this is very important to understand. So when you build a homepage, maybe what you will be saying to an American user will be very different to what you would be saying to a European user or Asian user. Also on the right, this is part of the boards that we've used for crowdsourcing. And on the left side, it's the members of the Japanese crowdsourcers, and on the right side, it's the Italian. And as you can see on the left side, a lot of people are using avatars with design and manga design, whereas on the right side, it's picture of them. And I think that's also a very good example of how people behave differently within the same product. And what we are trying to do all the time at Trello is letting the user express themselves the way they want. And instead of forcing them into having to upload their picture or doing something that is very maybe European or American, we always try to let people think about the product as they want. And we see it a lot across the workflow and the way people in different countries create different kind of workflow. So I think that's a good example of how we need to go beyond only translating, but also adapting to what the users want. And so this is an example of Airbnb, so I'm definitely not an expert on Airbnb, but I think it's a very relevant example of what can be done. On the left side, it's the American homepage, and on the right side, it's the Japanese one. And I don't know if you see the main difference is that there is no search bar in Japan. And so it comes from the fact that when they launched in Japan, they first translated the homepage with a search bar. And what they found out is that Japanese users were not looking for trips through the search bar. And what they understood after doing different surveys is that in Japan, when you buy a trip, you actually buy a package. And you are not used to be asked, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? So instead of saying, of letting the user say, I want to go to Tokyo for 5 days, they built some packages of 5 days in Tokyo, 4 days in Osaka, and people will interact much better with the app thanks to that. So I think that's another very good example of what we can do. At Trello right now, so we launched all the languages last year, and we are now into the process of optimizing our homepages and meta pages in general for helping users to, like for creating a better experience for local users. So we don't have all fancy homepages like that yet, but we're working on it. Nonetheless, what we have been able to work on very easily were marketing assets. And so we've done a lot of marketing in Brazil and France on the left side. And we are starting to doing more in the Nordics. And every time we create graphics, we always try to maintain our identity. So you can see that taco is over there. But we also make sure that we localize as much as we can. So a small Brazilian flag, or in the French landing page that we did, I don't know if you can see it, but there is a snowball with the Eiffel Tower. And so we didn't want it to be too cliche when we went to France, but the snowball is like kind of a national joke about like people traveling and bringing some very bad souvenir. And so that was like a delightful way of saying, we know we are coming to France, we know you and we love you, but we don't want to be too cliche, but we want to be here for you. And in the Nordics, we are also starting a Medium page, and we are having some specific design. And so, trying to bring these small details for graphics and for localizing as much as you can has been very successful for us. And so far, it has helped us grow. So that's it for today. But I will be around if you have more questions. But yeah, so that's our small experience of growing a product from 1 to 21 languages and hopefully being delightful for our 22 million users.